Everybody agrees there are two ways we can understand things, consciously and unconsciously, and that doesn't just apply to language learning. Think about riding a bike. You might know how to ride one, but if I asked you to explain to me exactly how you keep your balance, every muscular adjustment, every single change to the angle of the handlebars, you couldn't do it. You could give me a few conscious instructions, but those conscious instructions themselves obviously aren't what your body uses to actually know how to ride the bike. But again, that doesn't mean you don't know how to ride a bike. It just means you rely on unconscious knowledge as opposed to conscious knowledge to do so. Conscious knowledge is declarative. It's knowledge you can bring into awareness and state. If I know the French Revolution ended in 1799, I can consciously recall that fact and tell you. Unconscious knowledge is different. It isn't merely conscious knowledge that we don't think about or we don't remember. It cannot be fully represented as a series of declarative statements in the first place, meaning there's no way to share it, transfer it, or even easily prove its existence. For instance, there's no book you can read that would result in the perfect ability to drive a car. You must acquire the unconscious knowledge of how to drive a car through experience. And that distinction creates the central problem of language learning. How much of our ability to understand and produce the language comes from unconscious knowledge and how much comes from conscious knowledge? I can tell you that boda means wedding in Spanish. You can remember that fact, you can repeat it, you can declare it perfectly. But none of that by itself explains how boda becomes part of the unconscious language system you use to understand Spanish. Is it basically enough to just drill that connection between boda and wedding to get a native-like understanding of boda? Will we experience the word boda exactly how we experience the word wedding when we hear it? Will we recognize it spoken to us immediately in any context without recall? This is where how we think about conscious and unconscious knowledge matters. The way most people think about language is as such. I already know all these things about weddings in English, so if I just learn that boda means wedding, all of that information about wedding should come along for the ride. Hearing boda will be basically equivalent to hearing wedding. And underneath that assumption is this idea that a word has some essential unconscious core, while everything else connected to the word is just passive conscious knowledge that we apply to it while we listen. So the definition is the word. The fact that weddings usually have cakes, dancing, guests, and music is just information we happen to know about weddings. Whether that's true matters immensely when discerning effective methods for learning a language. If we believe that words are basically just single representations that we have to match to sounds in our target language, we might listen to help cement our understanding or connect words with other words. But the real work is in drilling those connections. Whereas if native-like understanding depends on building words out of thousands of comprehensible experiences, then listening isn't where we cement what we already learned, it's where the word is built in the first place. What we're gonna run into here is this academic distinction between lexical meaning and encyclopedic knowledge, or world knowledge. Lexical meaning is the information considered part of the word itself, and encyclopedic knowledge is everything else we know about the thing the word refers to. So the fact that a wedding is a ceremony where people get married is lexical, while the fact that weddings usually have cakes, guests, music, and dancing is encyclopedic. That distinction obviously exists conceptually, nobody disputes that. But it doesn't follow that our brain respects that distinction when it's unconsciously storing information. We can describe grammar, but it doesn't follow that the unconscious mind literally stores little grammar rules. We can describe a melody through sheet music, but it doesn't follow that our brain is literally storing that sheet music. We can define a word, but that doesn't mean that our unconscious mind is literally storing definitions. What I've been trying to show in this video series is we don't need to blindly speculate about how the unconscious mind stores information. We can actually deduce its behavior from logical necessity. That's what a thought experiment aims to do. It aims to say, if we can do X, then it must follow that Y is true. If we can retrieve a word just as automatically from incidental information as from a direct representation, that strongly suggests incidental information is itself unconsciously encoded. Let me show you what I mean. I'm gonna put an image on the screen and you're gonna tell me what you immediately think of. This is gonna be incredibly easy, there is no trick. Okay, now I'm gonna put a sentence on the screen with a missing word. Same thing, tell me the word you think of. Great wine starts with great. In both cases, the word appears immediately. You didn't consciously reason from the image to the grape, nor did you consciously reason through everything you know about wine to get to grape. We asked your brain a question, and it gave us an automatic unconscious response both times. The image encoded the question, what does this image represent? The sentence encoded the question, what does great wine start with? One used lexical information, the other used incidental information, but subjectively answering them felt exactly the same. And this doesn't just work with grape, this works with effectively every word we know. There's a certain arbitrarity to claiming that even though those experiences feel exactly the same, one was unconscious knowledge and the other was just really fast application of conscious knowledge. If we're being neutral about the evidence, the experiment would suggest that our brain does unconsciously encode incidental information about grapes. It seems like the brain stores words more like answers to questions than in some giant word bank. So a grape isn't just a grape. A grape is that thing that makes wine, that thing that grows in bunches, that thing that is purple. It's an intersection of a bunch of sets it belongs to. This representation of words is the most fitting explanation for why our conscious mind can recognize words in the form of set membership questions as automatically as it can recognize words in the form of visual experiences. And if that is the case, then it explains the gigantic amount of phenomena. One phenomenon that I haven't discussed yet in a video is this ability to unconsciously feel set membership as we traverse a list of words. I'm gonna state a list of words and you're gonna feel your mind move through this invisible chain of categories. Even though I never name a single category or tell you where one ends and where one begins. To get the best results, I would close your eyes here. I'll play a little sound when you can open them. Kiss, embrace, tenderness, devotion, scream, knife, threat, panic, vomit, rot, maggots, joy, pleasure, love, warmth, coffin, funeral, absence, loss, playground, candy, birthday, puppy. For some reason, even though you don't know the names of the categories, you can still feel these sudden shifts. It feels like you're following a melody, then all of a sudden I switch to some completely different melody, then I switch again. So you experience a harmony, then a dissonance is introduced, and then a new harmony is built from that dissonance, and then repeat. This is very hard to explain if our unconscious mind doesn't have the native ability to represent words as members of sets. If words are just interconnected atoms, we'd have to imagine that you're inventing these categories consciously as you hear the list. But that's not what it feels like. It feels like you recognize the boundary without even really knowing what the set is. What I want to contend is what gives us native-like comprehension is not this ability to quickly recall the meanings of words. It's this massive amount of incidental information contained in words that allows the language to become meaningful without conscious thought. Take a sentence like this. Mom, can I borrow the car? I need to go to the store. Nothing in that sentence gives you a definition of car. If you heard that sentence in real life or in a video, there might not actually be a car on the screen when you hear that. The car itself isn't present at all, and yet the sentence still teaches your unconscious mind something about what car means. A car is the kind of thing you can borrow from your mom. It is something you can take to the store. It is something that you can use to get somewhere. This is what comprehensible input is doing constantly. Most of the time, it doesn't represent a thing by showing you that thing itself. It represents a thing by saying that thing that X. The grape is the thing she ate. It was the thing that was purple. It was the thing that was sweet. Or even if you do see the grape on the screen when watching input, grape is the thing that looks like this. Every comprehensible encounter answers more and more set membership questions. Not what does this word mean questions, like can you borrow it? Can you take it to the store? Can you eat it? Can it be read? The word becomes the answer to those questions. That is the point of listening. It's not where you go to spot words that you've already learned. It's where the language builds these unconscious relationships that eventually make conscious knowledge about the language unnecessary. When I hear a sentence like, I couldn't hear the TV, so I blanked up the blank, I don't need to do conscious recall of definitions, because likely continuations of the sentence are already heavily weighted precisely because of the brain's ability to represent words as the thing that X. So here, the mind has the automatic ability to reduce turned and volume simply because of its ability to represent words in this way. The reason we feel so much strain when we listen to our target language above our proficiency level is too much conscious thinking, too much application of conscious knowledge. What I want to contend is that native-like processing emerges when enough information is unconsciously encoded that words become immediately meaningful when you hear them. You no longer need to retrieve incidental information about what that word means to interpret the message of the sentence. The unconscious system already contains enough information to make the word meaningful in context automatically. When your understanding depends on conscious knowledge, then every sentence gives you work to do. You hear boda consciously connected to wedding, then use what you know about weddings to understand the sentence. That process can absolutely help, and we all use it, but it takes time, it consumes our attention, and it creates that kind of listening friction that we've all experienced. And this explains why you don't unlock the ability to process podcasts and audiobooks in a native-like way simply because you've memorized definitions with high recall. Those things become understandable as more and more of the language becomes unconsciously encoded. Now I'm going to bring my experience into this. I felt myself getting progressively better reading Harry Potter, even though I looked up very few words. And when I say reading, I mean listening. When I first started with the Harry Potter audiobook, I replayed chapter 1 at least like 3 or 4 times. I was really struggling. But by book 6, just by listening and trying to get the message, I got up to 70 to 80% comprehension. I just fed my mind context and my recognition automatically grew. And this is the problem that the unconscious set framing solves. It answers the question, what was I really doing in all those hours of listening to Harry Potter, if not learning definitions of words? If I understood the message, even if I couldn't define every word, what exactly was my brain taking from those encounters? If you encounter an unknown word in a sentence you understand, we can say, well, your brain associated that word with the words around it. But what does that mean? What was associated with what? If I didn't have a definition of that word, well, it feels like there's nothing to associate anything to. I don't have a definition. I don't have a singular representation. Saying the brain made associations is good as a high-level summary, but for me, it's not enough. It doesn't get to the root of the question, well, what did you learn? And getting more precise has been the point of this unconscious set video series. So here's what unconscious sets allow us to say. Take the sentence, she ate the red juicy apple. If apple were unknown, the set membership framing would show us exactly what counted. Apple entered the set of things people eat, the set of things that can be read, the set of things that can be juicy, even though you didn't have a singular representation of the word. You just have this sound, and you know that this sound now fits into these sets. As context creates more and more sets, this intersection becomes clearer and clearer until the word is fully unconsciously acquired, meaning it takes absolutely zero conscious thought to support it as we listen. And by bringing conscious thought down to zero, we enable native-like processing and native-like comprehension. And if this is true, it explains why listening to the language at a level you understand is so effective. What helps you understand words is not just that you keep seeing the word over and over again and eventually that cements it in your mind. That is not what's happening. Every sentence you see in input is answering dozens and dozens of these set membership questions regarding where the word belongs. And it's happening at a scale that conscious study just never comes close to matching. And this kind of eliminates the problem of unknown unknowns that I've taken a lot of flack for. I suggested that most of our language knowledge comes from things that we never actually realize that we know. And what I've been showing is this turns out to be very true. We have a precise, unconscious understanding of set membership of words that none of us can consciously access. We can only demonstrate it's there through thought experiment. So we can see its results, but we can't see the sets themselves. And I believe that this is fully responsible for native-like comprehension. So where does conscious knowledge fit into this model? As I've said in other videos, conscious knowledge is useful insofar as it helps us understand the message. If knowing a translation makes an otherwise incomprehensible sentence comprehensible, then it allows that sentence to answer more set membership questions. We can only take as much context from an experience as we comprehend. When we watch a video, for instance, we have what we hear and we have what we see, but we also have what we know consciously. In that sense, conscious knowledge can function kind of like a lens on the input. The audio tells us something, the visuals tell us something, and our existing knowledge helps us interpret both. Think of the unconscious mind like a really dumb frog sitting on your shoulder when you're watching input. You can tell it as many times as you want that boda means wedding, but the frog doesn't understand explanations. The frog only understands experiences. What the translation can do is help you understand the scene, but the frog can only watch the bride, the cake, the guests, and the dancing while hearing boda and begin deducing how boda fits into the Spanish language network. The translation opened the experience, but the experience is what taught the frog. And something I forgot to say in my last video, input-based learning will feel different based on your proficiency phase. At absolute zero, it will feel like memorization. It will feel like high uncertainty. It will feel like you're overthinking about all the words. It's obviously not gonna feel like recognizing words based on set membership, but it will start to feel that way. But what I'm gonna do now is put some of these fill-in-the-blank puzzles on the screen in Spanish, but I'm gonna do very short expressions. And I would assume if you're above 300 plus hours, but definitely by 600 plus hours, and certainly by 1,000 plus hours, you'll be able to feel that same unconscious set pull that you feel with the native language fill-in-the-blank puzzles. What happens as you listen to more and more comprehensible input is you slowly and painfully progress from this understanding of the language as kind of more words and grammar to this complex network of experience that allows for automatic processing. Never feel that you have to force your brain to think in a way that it's not yet comfortable thinking, because you're just going to cause yourself guilt and anxiety. If you're understanding messages in the language, then you are acquiring the language. How you perceive that process does not matter to the frog. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear in my last video. I made a full video on my thoughts on direct translations, and I stress heavily in that video that you should not feel guilty using them. I'm gonna leave a link to that video in the description. If you didn't know, you just watched part 2 of my unconscious set video series. In part 3, we're gonna get into some highly practical demonstrations that show how comprehension is truly facilitated by unconscious sets. I'm gonna put part 1 of this series on the screen right now, just in case you're watching these backwards, because I assume I'm just putting the last part at the end screen of every video I'm making in this. Maybe I should do it in the reverse order, but it's too late, I can't, because I've already filmed this and the one before. Well, I didn't film this yet, doesn't matter. Part 1 right there. I will see you guys in the next video.